So, you've watched Heated Rivalry and fallen down the fandoms, either for the show, the actors themselves, the books, or maybe you've been in the romance space for a long time and you're like, do not talk to me about Heated Rivalry, I know more about this than you do. Or you've been a queer fan of hockey for a long time and now you can sadly commiserate with more romance readers that are coming into the real life hockey culture place and have been found to be disappointed. One fascinating part of this skyrocketing success for me has been the crossover between hockey and the romance space, which has been going on even before the show has come out, and difficulties on both sides when romance fans become hockey fans and vice versa. Let's talk about it. The Game Changers series by Rachel Reid is a 6-book series, soon to be 7, in September when Unrivaled comes out, the final book in the series, which I think is very kismet to like hockey culture and the way that hockey game series will go until like game 7. Each book is an couple, aka male and male main characters. Every book, at least one of them, is a hockey player. This series does not shy away from the impact of hockey culture, especially on the norm of misogynistic and homophobic language used between players, essay allegations, and other problematic features of the real-life hockey world. Similarly, how some people can tout that reading is not political while championing and enjoying female main characters and romanticides that like topple evil regimes, some people completely miss this critique in Rachel's work, especially the NHL themselves, who are working on profiting off of Heated Rivalry. This is clear because the NHL is trying to draw more fans to games to buy merch. You can see jerseys that have like Hollander on the back, the main character of Heated Rivalry's last name, Shane Hollander, participating in fan service by playing iconic scenes or at least the songs at games, which makes sense because capitalism, but walk with me here. But I think a big disconnect is happening, similar to what happens in book 1 in the Game Changer series, where Kip, who is not a hockey player but has watched hockey games with his dad, cheered for teams, is kind of like fair weathered fan or whatever, similar to like myself, and is caught off guard when he falls for a hockey player and realizes that it is like unfathomable for this hockey player to be even seen with someone who is outwardly queer, who could be perceived as queer. And that hockey world is so homophobic that leaps and bounds and judgments and chirping will be made from that single thing. And Rachel tackles this even further in book 3 of the series when one of the main love interests is very femme presenting queer man, and so it's even more, obvious to the outside world. There's even higher risk for this player to be with this person, because yes, a big part of hockey culture is being with the bros, hanging out, seeing them as like a family, but it would be nowhere near the norm for a hockey player, especially professionally, to have like queer friends, especially without some major speculation. So basically the NHL has had all these like new influx of fans, and then they arrive and then they're like, oh wait, there's a storied history here that is what Rachel has been telling us this whole time in her books, and it is true to real life. So as recent as 2023, the NHL banned pride tape to be used just during warm-ups. So a lot of teams can adopt to have pride nights where they'll come and celebrate the queer community. They'll usually have like themed jerseys and use pride tape on the sticks. And for when this first started, it was only for warm-ups. So the NHL deemed it to be like too distracting, and they actually banned pride tape during the warm-ups. It was quickly retracted later that month, but the damage had already been done. Part of the nuance here is that some players, it was an opt-in thing, and so some players were deemed as homophobic when they would not opt in to use the tape. This is also as nuanced because there are some Russian players who, out of an abundance of caution for their family back home, for themselves, they chose not to use the tape, as it is anything remotely being queer is seen as illegal in that country. I can't speak for that being the sole reason of every single player though, so I just want to make that clear. And some teams, particularly a team in Utah, unsurprisingly, they don't have pride nights at all, or some have kind of watered it down, saying that this is like hockey for all night, including LGBTQIA plus community, but also kind of like you're just not being as clear about it. I think also some fans are realizing what Rachel says in book 1 about there being no out NHL player is true still. And also very recently, the U.S. hockey organization just banned trans athletes from the sport. Harrison Brown, the first openly trans professional hockey player, has spoken out about this as well. Someone who was literally on Heated Rivalry, the show, and an important side character, part of a really funny moment with Ilya in the hotel room. The disconnect could not be more clear with fans.
The thing about these new sport bans that are coming out, barring trans women from participating, usually are based on nothing. Like, there's not an influx of trans athletes, and some of these sports have never seen a trans athlete participate in it. But through hockey, we are able to point to stories like Jessica Platt, who was a professional hockey player on the women's side and a trans woman. She did an amazing job being an advocate for the league, being an ambassador for inclusion, but was she one of the top players in the league? No. The argument of USA Hockey and all of these transphobic people is that trans women, anytime that they step onto the ice with cisgender women, they are automatically going to be better. We have the proof that Jessica Platt is a great hockey player, but was not the best in the league by far. Hockey is one of those sports where the culture between the men's side and the women's side are so deeply different. I do not feel comfortable playing on the men's side because of the culture of homophobic, transphobic, misogynist language and practices within that space.
Additionally, I think what also can come as a surprise for fans, and it's something that Rachel doesn't touch too much on her series, I think it's kind of hard to because all of her characters are like literally men, but the misogyny that is within the NHL. I want to say this is unspoken, but like it actually literally is like the terms of puck bunnies or puck SLUTSs, and also just infantilizing these players by calling them boys even when they're like 40 years old, or at least look 40, especially when a player is accused of SA. There are many examples, unfortunately, but one recent one went to court this past summer last year. This case alleged that multiple junior league hockey members, at this point they were playing professionally, this was back in 2018, had essayed a woman in a hotel room. I won't be going into too much detail of the case, besides an important detail that will come up later in the romance genre, because yes, I will be touching on how their representation isn't perfect either. According to this woman, she consented to relations with one player, and then suddenly more showed up in the room via him texting them. They alleged that all of this was consensual. They were found to be not guilty by a female judge who, in my opinion, said really hurtful things about this woman, who was intoxicated at the time of the event, which I feel like is proof enough for it to not be fully consensual, but yet she was critiqued for her memory to be hazy of the night's events. I'm going to post an article with more details about it, especially just to really like bear witness to this woman and how horrific what she went through was. There were so many comments and pressure in support of these men. One thing I noticed especially is that they would refer to this 20-year-old as a woman and to the men as boys, and that she was trying to ruin their careers now that they were professionally successful. But the thing is, she reported this crime pretty soon after it happened in 2018, and the way that these cases work in Canada is that the person who is the accuser or like who reports a crime doesn't always have control as to what goes into court. So the attorney general's brought this case to the crown against her will, and she literally like legally had to come and testify. Nothing was really her choice here, which is also another frustrating part, that they're accusing her of doing this on purpose. The NHL went to take back the suspension of these players so that they could play professionally, and Carter Hart was picked up by the Vegas Golden Knights, to the protest and also unfortunately celebration of some hockey fans. Very recently though, he got injured at a game and his teammates didn't even like check on him, and he's out for the 2026 season. Some of the comments, in my opinion, were so perfectly sassy and tied in with the case, and I will post them here. I'm not here to overly bash the NHL. I am actually a fair-weathered fan. I had kind of a rough start in the fandom because of dating someone whose friends were Chicago Blackhawks fans, and they were highly superstitious that it would actually like bleed into our relationship, and I would get accused of like ruining plays by like getting up to go to the bathroom. Like it was like a whole thing, and I was like, y'all are making me hate hockey, and it's actually like the one sport I can sit through, and that's why I became an LA Kings fan at the time. I'm no longer. But anyway, it is the one sport I do not need to be incentivized to attend. I will love to sit through a hockey game. I think it's so fascinating that they just like run around with like blades on their shoes chasing after this tiny little puck, and also it's like a very polite game, and yet fighting is partially sanctioned. And Heated Rivalry did kind of boost my enjoyment again, and I was that kind of person that like bought tickets to an AHL game. Highly recommend AHL games, by the way. I think NHL tickets can be very expensive, especially in this economy, and AHL is like just as fun, and usually you can sit even closer for cheaper, and you'll get on the Jumbotron. Really great to like take kids to. It's just really fun. Highly recommend AHL. And part of me coming back to the sport was finding the hockey podcast, of course, and I started to fall for the perceived earnestness of the empty netters. My algorithm was showing it to me on YouTube until you likely saw their scandal. I understand that it sucks for private messages to be released. Actually, like private messages are really having a moment, especially with like the whole Taylor Swift situation. Not sure what's going on there, but I can't ignore the uncomfortable feeling I had when I saw that one of the Empty Netters hosts referred to blue-haired Twitter. To me, it's one thing to find nuance in the way that he described, accusing the show of like checking a DAI box or whatnot. I get that you can find nuance in there because it is true in Hollywood. There's like representation for representation's sake. And it's like, was there anyone even queer or BIPOC in that writer's room? So it can perpetuate stereotypes by like, here's a gay character in the show or whatever. And at that time, he may not have known that Jacob, the writer and creator of the show, is a gay man. But the blue-haired Twitter thing I cannot ignore. It is giving like old-timey MAGA to me. Like, we don't need to get in the weeds of it, but I'm just like, it would be one thing if it would be like baby bangs, speaking of someone who once had baby bangs. But basically he was saying that all of his comments were made out of jealousy, as he is someone who has tried and failed to write a hockey show in Hollywood. They are writers, he and his brother. But in my opinion, his apology was not sufficient for me. Actually, I don't think he even said sorry. The majority of his response was frustration with the portrayal of his friend, which is totally valid. I just don't get why us as an audience would be like won back over by that.
Y'all, the other shoe just dropped. Now, from the moment that I started seeing this trend of like straight men react to watching Heated Rivalry, girl, I was distrustful. I feel like this is something that I've been trying to explain to a lot of my friends who have been asking me about hockey since they got into Heated Rivalry. I always tell them, like, the hockey space, you're gonna hear that it's like a very exclusionary space, whether it's hockey players themselves or the people that orbit around them. Most of these guys, they don't want you getting into hockey. So Outsports hasn't gotten a comment back from the podcast yet, so we'll wait to see what they say. This podcast has also gotten some hot water for using the term puck slut. Again, just like a derogatory term for like female hockey fans. Do I believe that all guys believe this, or that some of these like straight men reacting to Heated Rivalry videos, do I think that all of them are disingenuous? No. I also think it's a very important reminder as we're starting to see a lot of teams incorporate Heated Rivalry into their pride nights, obviously making the NHL money, and that's the only reason that they've started to acknowledge it. This is something that Francois Arnault, who plays Scott Hunter, has actually said in some of his interviews. And I do believe, and I want to continue to believe, that Heated Rivalry is like making a difference in this league, but we should always be careful about who we're platforming, who is like making money off of what.
I've been a new fan of the podcast What Chaos, and I am like desperate that they never be canceled because they seem like also earnest and charming guys. Empty Netters had a great interview with the actress who played Svetlana. So two things can be true at once. They could have been won over by the show, but at the same time, I really can't ignore kind of the dog whistles of that guy's comments. At the same time, What Chaos also had a great interview with the actor who played Kip. And What Chaos recently self-described himself as being kind of a random podcast. That's kind of why they call themselves What Chaos, because they'll go off on tangents of like loving Mamma Mia too. It just makes me feel very safe. And they clap back in the New York Times for calling them painfully straight. So while a lot of people have said Empty Netters have been dismantling toxic masculinity, I actually feel like What Chaos has been walking the walk this whole time. At the end of the day though, I dislike that we're centering straight men so much in this conversation, but the bulk of hockey and NHL fans seem to be straight white men. And some of my friends were not surprised by this reveal of the Empty Netters, but I naively was. And I also want to note it was recently revealed that they had previously made really insensitive comments about Carter Hart returning to the NHL, kind of speculating why people would be like so upset. And also, I'm not here to say everything in the hockey romance world is perfect either. That's why I'm talking about romance readers who become hockey fans and hockey fans who become romance writers. It's always a curious thing to me when I try a new author who writes sports romance. It's kind of like when I make a new friend and you drop hints like, I believe in vaccines, I believe in human rights, this is my voting history, I voted at all, period. And I wait to see how heteronormative their books are. And I enjoy all sides of the spectrum. One thing I applaud Rachel Reid for is how much of a hockey fan she really is. She has spoken about this in multiple interviews, but a favorite one of mine was recently where this host had Hudson, Connor, and Jacob on, and she had them fill in the blanks of like, Heated Rivalry, come for the blank, stay for the blank. And this is what Rachel had to say.
And so I would like to now turn it over to you, Rachel Reid. Heated Rivalry. Come for the
hot men, stay for the deconstruction of misogyny and toxic masculinity and all of the problems with hockey culture and discussions about mental health.
She doesn't shy away from the real world critique in her books. That being said, I also love works of authors like Emily Chaclet, whose sports romances exist in this kind of like alternate reality where queerness is just like accepted. Like these two NFL players can just publicly be together, and they are, and like little later works, she even does one with another hockey player as well. They have a bi awakening. They don't have bi panic. Chelsea Corto is another author. Her books are pretty heteronormative. Recently, though, she did have a bi female main character and does touch on what that's like, in that she's the sister of a professional hockey player who has kept that part of her identity because even tangentially, she could put him at like exposure risk for being an out bi woman. I also want to note, though, Chelsea really touches on misogyny in the real hockey world a lot in her books, and I really appreciate that. There are a lot of like women in the workplace in the sporty world that are thought of as lesser. Stephanie Archer is another author who I feel pretty safe with reading hockey, just for like little subtle hints. Like at one point in Gloves Off, her hockey captain says, you know, party tonight, but you know, don't go too hard with your like either boys or girls or whatever. So just the mere fact that he's like accepting that his fellow players could be out trying to pick up a boy is like shocking, but it's normalized in this world. And also she uses really inclusive language when it comes to spice. It's not heteronormative in the way that like P and V equals spice. It's very like queer friendly. And then we come to representation like Candy Steiner and Stand Your Ground that released recently. I am basically going to reiterate my review that I wrote. To start, I don't think this was intentional on Candy's part whatsoever. I'm giving her the benefit of the doubt, even though other hockey romance authors did see the high profile case this past summer in Canada and comment on it. The main male character in this book is inexperienced with spice and several times brings up the one experience he did have, and that was when he was in the junior leagues in a hotel room with one woman and 3 other guys. Stop me if this sounds familiar. The way this is fictionally phrased is to show a woman in control, offering these guys carte blanche and the main male character as just a young guy along for the ride. At one point, he gets laughed at. I just think it's a poor choice to perpetuate this narrative that junior hockey players are just boys and it's the puck bunnies who pull them into these situations. They've somehow lost all agency, you know, being white, male, rich, one woman against multiple men. I'm being sarcastic here. I get what the author was trying to do, bring up the hint of a dom dynamic and lead to the main love interest doing it right and in a healing way in that current timeline for both of them. It's just weird to me that the female main character even gets her own essay healing storyline, and yet the lone puck bunny in a hotel room stays a stereotype. Even fictional hockey romance does not exist in a vacuum. And another plot line I found out that can be a trope in sports romance is this one, which is false accusations of essay.
I was the ghostwriter of a popular hockey romance series. No, not Heated Rivalry. I'm obviously just thinking about it because of Heated Rivalry and because as a ghostwriter, sometimes with working with certain romance clients, I was often a lot younger than those clients and they were writing characters who would be about my age. And so I sometimes kind of worked as like, I don't know, like a liaison for being 24 at the time or whatever. And one of the books that I once turned down writing was about a hockey star who had been falsely accused of sexual assault, and was like, oh, this girl is just lying, she's lying, and then in the end it turned out that she was lying, and was just in it for money. That book was never written because I spoke with the author about the fact that that was not an acceptable plotline. And I sometimes wonder what the reaction to that book would have been. I first found Heated Rivalry because of the book Role Model, which deals with this in the exact opposite way.
And in the comments, I found out that Serena Bowen had written this subtrope. So I really don't see myself ever reaching for her books in the future. One hockey romance author is a bit relatively new to the scene is Lexi Bellflower, and I highly recommend her, especially for her content. She is a like from birth hockey fan, and she has experienced misogyny playing as a girl on a men's team, and yet she has loved the sport throughout her entire life. She actually married a player who went on to play in the NHL, so she'll also talk about like WAG culture, what it was like to be like closeted, and then afterwards feeling more comfortable to come out as a queer woman. And she doesn't shy away from critique in the hockey world. She talked publicly about the court case this past summer.
Have you seen the interviews of NHL players saying that they would be welcoming and supportive of having a gay teammate? Pride nights are happening across the NHL right now, and we've got players with pride tape, and we've got players saying that they would be fine having a gay teammate, and I think that is fantastic allyship. And even if not everybody on the team agrees with that sentiment, having a player who's not only well respected in the league, but in his locker room, set that kind of tone for his team carries a lot of weight. I always love when players are on record saying all are welcome on my team, but I especially love that the Montreal Canadiens head coach also had something similar to say. An NHL coach decides if a player is playing or if they are scratched. They also decide how many minutes they get that night, okay? You want to be liked by your coach. And so I love that there is a coach on record saying, I'm not homophobic. But let's take it one step further. What about the GM? The GM is the one who offers up contracts. They're the one who is potentially going to re-sign you. They're the one who might send you to the minors. And don't stop there. What about NHL owners? Is your team even hosting a Pride Night this year? You're not? Ooh, why not? It takes a lot more than a couple players saying kind things to change the toxic environment, but oh gosh, it is still so nice and worth celebrating and amplifying.
She's also just a really entertaining storyteller, seems like a really cool person, and I'm excited for her second hockey romance book. As I started going through my recent hockey reads to comment on how I thought the representation was for each authors, I realized how white they are, and Emily Rath posted this thread that may explain why. I also want to note that Emily Rath is an author who also has written hockey romance and also polyamorous and queer romance. Basically what she's saying is that hockey romance may be the most popular subgenre because of how white it is. I saw this reply from Talk About Swoon for Black hockey romance author recommendations, and also I just recommend Talk About Swoon's Instagram page in general. There are a wealth of recommendations. Just keep scrolling back and you'll be set. To wrap up what ended up being a pretty depressing recap of hockey culture and hockey romance, one comment I really appreciated on the post-mortem Heated Rivalry episode of What Chaos did with collaboration with Drop Your Buffs. Evan Rose Katz hosts that podcast. If you've seen his interviews with Hudson and Connor, highly recommend. And to paraphrase, one of the commenters said that Heated Rivalry won't be considered a success when a professional NHL hockey player feels comfortable coming out. It will be when parents raise their hockey players in a better culture and environment with more inclusive mindset, and to make the whole hockey culture at large more comfortable space for queer players. I am so glad, of course, that closeted athletes feel seen by the show, as they've expressed to Rachel and to Hudson directly himself. I do hope it can really permeate with parents and caregivers and coaches on what the world could look like in a more inclusive environment. I hope it makes them question why you would ostracize someone when, for example, in the show, episode 5, when Shane and Ilya are texting back and forth, it's pretty mundane. They're just a regular couple talking about what they're doing that day, talking about the hockey season, and it's just like, why would you hate this? Why would you be mad at this? Why would you want your players to be disincentivized to be a part of a partnership like this when it is their true identity and their true passion, who they really want to be in love with? Like, is this really what you're so afraid of your players being? So let's do better on both sides of the aisle in hockey romance and culture, and maybe we can merge those two cultures together a little bit better. So please tell me your status, either as a hockey fan, hockey romance fan. Have you been hurt by hockey culture? Have you been healed by hockey romance? Or have you had those situations where you have felt like hockey culture was actually still perpetuated within hockey romance? I, for one, am so excited to read Unrivaled, especially because the premise is going to be about a hockey podcast that is homophobic. Okay, bye.